The moment my sister-in-law Jennifer announced that I was obviously renting because people like me can't afford property, I decided it was finally time to stop hiding what I'd actually built. A commercial real estate portfolio worth $47 million that generated more annual revenue than her husband's entire corporate career would produce in a lifetime. I'd been deliberately quiet about my success for years, watching her brag about her house, her renovations, her mortgage struggles, knowing the entire time that my commercial properties were generating enough cash flow to purchase her house outright every single month if I felt like it. But I wasn't going to let her keep diminishing me while I sat at her dining room table eating her Thanksgiving turkey. My name is Veronica Lawson. I'm 41 years old, I own 73 commercial properties across Texas and Oklahoma, and I'd spent the last decade building an empire while my family quietly assumed I was barely scraping by. My brother Derek had married Jennifer 12 years ago, and she'd made it her personal mission to remind me, at every family gathering, exactly how inferior my financial status was compared to theirs. She bragged about their house in the Dallas suburbs, a beautiful property worth maybe $1.2 million. She talked about their mortgage, their renovations, their investment in real wealth. And I'd let her, because I'd been too busy actually building real wealth to bother correcting her. But something shifted at Thanksgiving dinner, right around the moment she told everyone that I probably didn't understand real estate because I'd always been a renter. The dinner had been at their house, the one she never stopped talking about. It was a nice property, I'll admit. Well-maintained, tastefully decorated, the kind of house that exists to be photographed for a home design magazine. But it was also deeply, fundamentally limited in its potential. It was a residence, not an asset. It was something you lived in, not something that worked for you. Jennifer had been on what I called her wealth performance tour all afternoon. She'd given the new guests, including my parents, a full walkthrough, pointing out the marble countertops, the custom cabinetry, the smart home technology she'd installed that summer. She'd mentioned the property taxes, high, the maintenance costs, constant, and the mortgage, which I'd calculated based on what Derek made, was probably eating about 35% of their gross household income. It had been my mother who'd started the conversation that led to everything. "Veronica, when are you going to get yourself a house?" my mother had asked innocently. "You're not getting any younger, and real estate is such a good investment." "She probably can't afford it," Jennifer had said, laughing in that cruel way that was meant to sound playful but landed like a weapon. "Have you seen how much houses cost in Dallas? I mean, good for her for living below her means, but real estate is really for people who have actual financial security. Like Derek and me. You need capital, credit, a stable income source. Not everyone has those things." The table had gone quiet. Even Derek had shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I'm not renting, actually," I'd said calmly, setting down my fork. "I stopped renting about 11 years ago." "Oh, so you own a condo?" Jennifer had said, trying to recover. "That's nice. I mean, condos are fine for people who don't want the maintenance responsibility of actual property ownership." "I don't own a condo," I'd said. "I own commercial real estate. 73 properties across Texas and Oklahoma." The silence had been absolute. "You own apartments?" Jennifer had asked, still trying to contextualize this into something that fit her narrative of my financial inferiority. "No," I'd said. "Commercial properties. Office buildings, retail centers, industrial complexes, mixed-use developments. My portfolio is worth approximately $47 million, and it generates about $6.2 million in annual revenue after expenses." Derek had literally put down his wine glass and stared at me. "That's not possible," Jennifer had said. Her voice had taken on a defensive edge. "You work in marketing for that tech company. You make like $120,000 a year." "I made that," I'd corrected. "I left that job 8 years ago. Now I run my own real estate development company. I have a managing director who oversees daily operations. I have a team of acquisition specialists, property managers, and financial analysts. I spend about 15 hours a week on the business, mostly reviewing acquisition opportunities and strategic planning." My mother had put her hand to her mouth. "This seems like you're exaggerating," Jennifer had said, but her voice had become uncertain. "I mean, how would you have gotten $47 million in commercial real estate? That requires significant capital, business acumen, banking relationships." "It requires all of those things, yes," I'd said. "I started 11 years ago by purchasing a small office building in Austin with a loan and $200,000 of my own capital. That building was worth $1.8 million. I fixed it up, stabilized the tenant base, and sold it 3 years later for $2.4 million. I took that profit and purchased 2 buildings. Then 4. Then 8. I reinvested every penny of profit back into acquisitions. I networked extensively with commercial lenders. I educated myself about real estate cycles and market timing. I paid attention to economic trends and demographic shifts. And I built something valuable. Derek had been doing mental math. I could see it happening in real time. So your monthly cash flow is? He'd started. About $517,000 before management expenses and debt service, I'd said. After all expenses and debt payments, I net approximately $380,000 per month. Your house payment, Jennifer, is approximately $9,400 a month, right? Based on what Derek has mentioned about the mortgage? That's roughly 2.5% of my monthly net income. So I could pay your entire annual house payments out of my coffee budget, which, for the record, is about $4,200 a year. Jennifer's face had gone completely white. I don't believe this, she'd said, but her voice had wavered. You're making this up. You're just trying to make me feel bad. I'm not trying to make you feel anything, I'd said, keeping my voice neutral and kind, which somehow made it worse. I'm answering your assumption that I couldn't afford real estate because I was just renting. I wasn't renting. I was being strategic. I was waiting for the right market conditions. I was accumulating capital. And then I started building. You're welcome to see my property records, my portfolio documents, anything you want. It's all public information anyway. The deeds are recorded with the county. Derek had excused himself to get his laptop. When he'd come back, he'd started looking up my properties. I could see him clicking through, seeing the commercial buildings I owned, verifying the addresses, cross-referencing them with ownership records. These are all real, he'd said quietly, looking at Jennifer. These are all legitimate commercial properties. I recognize several of these buildings. That office complex on Highway 75? That's worth at least $8 million by itself. I paid $6.2 million for it, I'd said. 3 years ago. It's appreciated, yes, but the real value is in the cash flow. The tenant mix is premium. 94% occupancy. I have a 7-year-old waiting list for available space. My father, who rarely said much at family gatherings, had leaned back in his chair and smiled at me. It was a look of profound pride. Veronica, he'd said, I had no idea you were doing this. I've been doing this for 11 years, I'd said. I've just been quiet about it. I figured if I was successful, it would speak for itself eventually. And if I failed, I didn't want family judgment. Turns out I succeeded anyway, so here we are. Jennifer had left the table and gone upstairs. Derek had continued looking at my properties on his laptop, scrolling through each one, understanding gradually what I'd built. My mother had started asking intelligent questions about my business model. My father had told me he was proud of me. And I'd finished my turkey, feeling the weight of 11 years of quiet success finally being acknowledged. What I hadn't done was gloat. I hadn't mocked Jennifer's house or her mortgage or her concept of wealth. I'd simply answered her question with facts. And those facts had been devastating enough on their own. Jennifer had eventually come back downstairs. She'd been quieter for the rest of dinner. We'd talked about other things, my mother's garden, my father's retirement plans, Derek's work situation. But the dinner had fundamentally changed. Jennifer no longer had the power to diminish me. She'd tried, and I'd simply told the truth. And the truth had dismantled her entire narrative of my financial inferiority. 2 days after Thanksgiving, Jennifer had texted me. I'm sorry for what I said, her message read. I was judgmental and cruel. I was also incredibly wrong about your financial situation. Derek spent all day Friday showing me your portfolio. I don't fully understand commercial real estate, but I understand now that you've built something significant. I was envious, I think, that your success looked so different from mine. I thought real estate only looked one way: houses and mortgages and renovation projects. I didn't understand that actual wealth looks different than what I was measuring it by. I'd called her instead of texting back. I appreciate the apology, I'd said. And I want you to understand something. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. Your house is beautiful. Derek has built a solid career. You're doing well. But wealth isn't a finite resource where someone else's success means less for you. I was quiet about my success because I didn't want it to become this, a competition, a measurement, a way to keep score. But I also shouldn't have let you spend 11 years diminishing me without at least knowing what I'd actually built. I know, Jennifer had said. And I'm genuinely sorry. Can I ask you something, though? Of course, I'd said. Why commercial real estate? She'd asked. Why not residential? Everyone talks about flipping houses, investing in rental properties. Because commercial real estate is where actual wealth lives, I'd said. Residential real estate is about lifestyle. It's personal. It's something you live in or rent out. Commercial real estate is pure business. It's about lease rates and occupancy percentages and tenant quality. It's about understanding market cycles and making strategic acquisitions. It's about building something that compounds in value over time. And it's about understanding that true wealth is generated through systems and assets, not through personal effort. That makes sense, Jennifer had said. And I'm grateful you explained it. We'd talked for another 30 minutes, and something had shifted between us. Not just forgiveness, but understanding. Jennifer had realized that my success wasn't a reflection on her failure. We were just building different things. And both things could be valuable. A year later, Derek and Jennifer had consulted with me about their own commercial real estate strategy. I'd advised them on a small strip mall investment in their area. Nothing massive, but something that could generate decent cash flow and provide them with a hedge against inflation. They'd taken the leap, and within the first year, the property had performed exactly as projected. Jennifer had sent me a photo of herself and Derek standing in front of the property, holding a bottle of champagne. Thanks for believing in us, her message had read. I'd smiled, because that's what I'd learned through all of this. Real wealth isn't about making other people feel small. It's about understanding that success comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show someone else what's possible when you actually try. My $47 million portfolio had taught me more than just finance. It had taught me that quiet success is the most powerful kind, and that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the accumulation. It's in being humble enough to help someone else understand what they might accumulate if they simply had the courage to try.